Hello again, I'm Lee Kreider.
And I am Maria Vasquez, and this is the Ohio Ram Show, a show about cycling and ultracycling.
And this is show number 180. And as always, this show is brought to you by the time stations in Oxford, Ohio, time stations 41, and time station 42 in Blanchester, Ohio, time stations in the Race Across America. And to learn more about today's guest and the organizations which she supports, go to the show notes, which are located right below this video. And if you're watching on YouTube, go to the description below the video, and you'll see a link to this show and the show notes. On today's show, we're going to go to Wyoming to visit with Kimberly Coates, but we're not going to talk much about Wyoming. We're going to talk about Rwanda and her role as marketing director for Team Rwanda. If you watch the professional stage races on television, from time to time you're going to hear reference to the developments of cycling in Africa. And we're happy to talk to someone today who's going to share with us her experience of working with the people of the country of Rwanda in developing their cycling program there. They face challenges that we here in the rest of the world don't even begin to understand, and yet they're doing some wonderful things there. So with that, we're going to go out to the wild, woolly west, the cowboy state of Wyoming, and talk about the African country of Rwanda. Kimberly Coates. Okay, first of all, Maria, my co-host, how are you tonight?
I'm doing greatly. How about you?
I'm doing well, surprisingly so. And we're going to head right on over to, where's that at? Savory, Wyoming?
Savory, Wyoming, yes.
Where on God's earth is Savory, Wyoming, Kimberly?
It's along the Colorado border near the Medicine Bow National Forest in Wyoming, and our closest town is about 20 miles away, Baggs, Wyoming. Our closest place for groceries is Craig, Colorado, about 60 miles away. So,
I know Craig, by golly.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's my go-to place.
And it looks like I see a little bit of Western decor there, some knotty pine and some cowboy hats. Are you a cowgirl?
I am not. I am a city girl.
Kimberly, there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding of Rwanda because of some past history that we really heard a lot about, and we haven't heard much about Rwanda since then. So kind of update us on Rwanda.
Rwanda is really quite a remarkable country. In 1994, they did have a genocide, which is what you're referring to. They've just been on this remarkable path of rebuilding, reconciliation. It's under President Kagame, he just started his third term as the president of Rwanda. He has made the place incredibly safe. A lot of foreign investment. I think their biggest exports are probably tea and coffee. From where it was 23 years ago, immediately after the genocide, to where it is now, it's actually surpassed a lot of other African countries that had much better positions back in the early 90s. So, yes.
And so we're here to talk about cycling and how it's developing in Rwanda. And for those of you who are longtime fans of RAM, you will know the name Jock Boyer. Jock Boyer won the Race Across America in, I believe, 1985. Jock Boyer has had a big hand in getting things started in Rwanda, has he not? Tell me about that.
So he went in 2006. His friend Tom Ritchie kind of dragged him over there, got him a plane ticket, and he went to host a race. They did the Wooden Bike Classic, and at that race in 2006, they saw some talent. They were really surprised by the cyclists that they saw, the riders who participated in the race. Jacques said, I'll go back for 3 months. And he did in 2007. And he tested some athletes and formed a team initially of 5 riders. And he just came home this last year. So he was there 10 years. He lived in Rwanda.
Okay, well, tell us a little more about the team, how it's developed.
Probably the most famous of the riders is Adrian Ian Shootie. He just spent the last few years on Team Dimension Data World Tour team. He was the first Rwandan to ever qualify for the Olympics in cycling. He did the mountain bike cross-country course in 2012 in London. In 2016, he also qualified for the road race and did the road race in Rio. And we also had another Olympic athlete in Rio, Nathan Bukasinyi, who did mountain bike cross country. And he was one of the original 5 as well. So I went over there in 2009, and I was also only supposed to be there 3 months. I went over to help Tom Ritchie with his cargo bike project. I just started helping him because I liked the team. I fell in love with all the guys, loved what they were doing. I just kind of built myself a job as far as being invaluable on my organizational skills. After my initial 3 months, I decided to stay. And in 2010, Jacques and I spun Team Rwanda off into its own nonprofit. We now have a 3-acre compound in Rwanda, the Africa Rising Cycling Center, with a professional garage that's you probably wouldn't find anywhere on the continent. The bikes that the guys were riding were probably 20, 30 years old. A lot of them were left when the Belgians were there. There was no bike shop. Pretty much everything came in somebody's suitcase at some point. When Pat McQuaid was head of the UCI, Pat had started a program called the World Tour Pro Solidarity Program, whereby World Tour teams had to give away a certain portion of their bikes every year to developing nations. And so that's really what got us going. And we finally got some decent race bikes. We were given these bikes because Rwanda is not corrupt. If the bikes came in, the bikes went to kids. We used them for races, and they knew that if they gave Rwanda something, that it would be used for the right purpose and, not sold on the black market.
Because you have a women's team as well. And so, Maria, you pick up the strain here, will you?
Okay, so thank you for letting us know, everything about Rwanda and cycling. I'm wondering, like Lee said, about women and cycling.
Yes. Rwanda is not a country. There's certain countries, like you'll see women cycling in South Africa. I mean, just cycling for transportation, or I see women in Tanzania. Rwanda was one of those cultures that women didn't ride bikes. So when we started, of course, we were just on such a shoestring budget that everything went to the guys. That's where we could make the most impact and move up the ranks of the Africa Tour and develop a program. So it was probably in the last 3-4 years that some of these girls, mostly coming out of the small town where Adrian Ian Shootie is from, or Amagana, they started riding and started showing up at our place in the northern part of the country, and we started testing them. And there were a few that were pretty decent. And it's still really small in Rwanda, the women's cycling, but in other countries that we work, such as Ethiopia and Eritrea, it's a much larger group of women. And what's been interesting to see, just even in the last couple of years, are other countries really coming up to the plate. I just held an international women's camp in November and December, and we had a Kenyan woman, Nancy Akini, who's really good. It's got a lot of potential. She came, and 3 Nigerian women, 2 from Botswana, and 3 Ethiopians, along with a couple of Rwandan women. We face all the same challenges as women's teams anywhere in the world, so it's no different. There's never enough money. In Africa, especially, there's no racing for women. It's outside of local races on the Africa Tour. There's There's nothing. There's the Continental Championships, maybe the All African Games, and that's pretty much it. There's no real Africa Tour race for women.
Is there a team already formed, like women's team already formed?
In Rwanda, they do have a women's team. They'll probably send, I don't know if they're going to send any to the Commonwealth Games, but we'll probably field a team of 4 to 6 women for the African Continental Championships in February, which are actually being held in Rwanda. Generally, we've had one really strong woman. She did the World Championships in Richmond, Virginia in 2015. And she finished the road race. So we were happy. I mean, that was a tough course and a tough field, and she hung on. And we also sent a woman to the 2016 World Championships. We didn't send anybody to the 2017, but there were Ethiopian girls at the 2017 World Championships. It's just so hard to get women racing. I mean, there's just no races. There's the local stuff. And I'm always harping on the local races because they're so short. And, you know, even with women's professional racing, sometimes I'm so irritated because I'm like, these women can ride so much longer and they want to ride longer. It's like, you know, you never know. If I see somebody that ends up doing really well in long distances, I'll have to ship them to the US and see how they go. Because in Rwanda, you could ride from one end of the country to the other, and you could do that in like a day, easy.
Oh, and the training. How about the training? Is it easy for them to train? Like, because people always complain about not having on the road, you know, the cars and everything. I come from Puerto Rico, so I know you know, how difficult it might be to be out there with no bike lanes. But I'm wondering how tough it is for them.
It's hard. Rwanda has got really nice roads. The problem is, in just the 8 years I was in Rwanda, they just went from maybe like one nice road to a lot of nice roads. With those roads becomes more cars and more drivers. And we've had a lot of accidents recently. In fact, we sadly just lost a girl in November. We've lost 2 riders over the last 3 years. You know, most of these girls and boys are just out on the road every day riding and training. And so it makes it difficult for sure. When our females ride in Rwanda, it's a constant hassle. They're not in danger per se, but it even happened with me is guys don't see women on bikes. And so, you know, they heckle the girls, they hassle the girls. If they have to stop and fix a tube, the men are trying to take the wheel and do it for them. And my girls can probably change a tire way better than any of the men. You know, one of our top girls, the woman who did the 2015 World Championships, her mother told her, well, you can be in cycling, but you know, then you have to get married, and, you know, what if you can't have babies? And then her girlfriends were telling her that she might not be able to have kids if she kept riding a bike.
Oh, wow.
And so there's this whole stigma, and they don't realize, and you know, Maria, as a woman, how we get much better the older that we get, especially in longer distances. And my one girl, Jeanne d'Arc, she just did an interview, I think it was about 6 months ago, and she's 22. Yes, 22 this year. And she said, well, maybe when I'm 24, I'll get married and then I'll retire and start coaching. And I'm like, retire? Like, you got another good 20 years at least in you. It's interesting. I talked to them about Kristen Armstrong. You know, I'm like, she won an Olympic medal and she was 40 something, and getting them to understand that is just something that's really difficult. And what's interesting, there's a young woman named Aisha Mcgowan who is trying to become the first African-American woman to race professionally. I hope and pray she does it, because these girls see a bunch of white girls racing bikes. They don't see anybody of color. They don't see anybody who looks like them, anybody who comes from where they come from. I remember when Daniel Tekla-Hamanot got the King of the Mountain jersey in the Tour de France a couple years ago. We were all sitting there watching the tour on a computer in Rwanda and watching the stupid thing buffer nonstop because our internet was so bad. And I remember the second he got that jersey, and all of my guys just screamed and cheered. And the amount of hope and belief that Daniel Tekle did with just that one thing, getting the King of the Mountain jersey, it made all my guys go, well, if he can do it, we can do it. Because he comes from where we come from. He looks the way we look. You know, he's poor like we're poor. And I think you need some of that to just break through before any of these women really grasp, you know, the potential, because it is hard. I mean, we've faced racist comments in races, and, you know, we've what it took to get that young man or young woman to that starting point, that starting line. American and European kids have no idea. They have no concept. My kids don't have a parent at home that has a credit card that if they get stuck in the airport, they can call mom and dad and get themselves bailed out. You know, my guys and girls are supporting families at home, like extended families, 20, 30 people they're feeding.
It's not even about Rwanda. It's about the cycling girls. It's being able to meet them and, you know, tell them, hey, this is doable. I'm a mom. I have 3 kids.
Yes.
I have to work for a living.
See, I need women like you to come over there and kick their butts as a mom with 3 kids and a job and everything else. So,
Lee, this is not working for me. Now I want to travel the whole world.
The thing you mentioned about the problem with women, that's, first of all, that's not unique to Rwanda.
Yeah.
I think, Maria, you've probably been harassed out there, and I've seen other women harassed. And
thank you.
I should say that today, the day we're recording this, is the birthday of Mary Brown, who is 88 years old. If your girls could see her, she looks very much like they look. And she's a Ram veteran, and bless her heart, happy birthday to Mary, although by the time she sees this, it'll be ancient history. A wonderful woman, had her on the show many years ago. She's part of the Major Taylor Club here,
yeah.
which is, are you familiar with Major Taylor?
I am. It was so great. When we were in Richmond, Virginia, there was an artist who had painted this gorgeous mural on a side of the building of Major Taylor. And, you know, because we were an all-Black African team, we met the artist, and he gave us a signed copy of his work.
All right. So, Kimberly, thank you very much for being with us tonight, and thank you so very much for all the information, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you. Thank you both for having me. I really appreciate it, and for sharing these stories about Rwanda and these other African countries in cycling.
Well, thank you, Kimberly, for that enlightenment on Rwanda. We hope that we'll be seeing more Rwandans, not only in professional racing and stage racing, but we would hope that someday we'll see some of them here in the United States in some of the ultracycling events. And we do want to thank all of you who watch the show. We've had so many wonderful comments here of late. Keep on supporting the show, which supports the work of Ultracycling. And for our next show, we're going to have Team PHAB, Team Fab, which is Phenomenal Hope from Australia and Belgium. It's going to feature a 2-person team in the Race Across America, a part of the Team Phenomenal Hope program, and it will have on the show our good friend Sarah Matthews from Australia and a new friend, Tommy Van Steenkist from Belgium. Goodbye, Maria.
Goodbye, Lee.
And goodbye to all of you. We'll see you again in about 10 days.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.